So whenever I pick a topic of discussion for my podcast, I generally start with numericals, like what is the prevalence of the issue we are talking about, whether it is protein deficiency or nutritional crisis of India, whether it is muscle deficiency due to lack of physical activity, or to be specific, like a weight training kind of stuff in India, or whether may it be sleep crisis, or let's say diabetical or a metabolic crisis. There is always a numerical involved, let's say 70%, 80%, 85%. But the topic we are trying to discuss, I think the number goes to 100%, if I'm not wrong.
Pretty
And
much.
hence, it is a term that has been used like what you say, randomly. There is also a synonym which I can use, which is a tension. Like in the language, they tell tension mat lena, stress mat lo. And the definition is really sparse, because it can be used in the entire spectrum of what you say, a sign or a symptom, or what you say, a manifestation of it inside the body. So just to lay the foundations from a clinical perspective, what's your take on what is stress and how a person should look at it?
So immediately when you frame the question in that way, we are automatically gravitating towards an idea that stress is a bad thing.
Okay.
Commonplace, we use the word stress in a negative context, right? I'm feeling stressed today generally means that I'm not feeling that great. Something is going on. And physically, I'm sure all of our viewers will appreciate that their mouth might feel dry, that their tummy might be a little upset, that they might be sweating a little bit more, their palms will feel clammy, etc. I don't look at stress that way. And the whole reason why I wrote the book and called it Good Stress, Bad Stress is because I wanted individuals to appreciate that, number one, that there are two types of stress. There are two sides to the coin. Both of them have differing effects on the body, which we will go through, show in today's conversation. And more importantly, that there is an advantage when you view the benefits of stress in the right way. Stress is a biological phenomena. It has evolved in almost every single species, whether it's the plant kingdom, animal kingdom, etc. And it's the opportunity for the organism to survive and thrive and hopefully flourish. For us as human beings, as primates, we fundamentally just have to do three things. We have to outrun the lion, we have to outrun the deer, and we need to be able to compete with our tribe to find a mate and pass our genetics on, right? All of those are made possible through the action of stress. It's the fight and flight mechanism. It gets us ready to go. So that's the underlying message. I'm sure we're going to dive deeper into it today, but the message is stress can be a good thing, and we need to harness it in the right way to be able to thrive under pressure.
Let's start with the good stress and the bad stress. You told there are two distinct types. Can you explain that in the most simplistic manner for the viewer?
Yeah. So the good stress is the fight and flight mechanism, which is the feelings that you have internally, which prepares you for a particular challenge ahead of you. And then either one of two things happen. Either you succeed and the event is great, or you fail and you could get eaten by the lion, or you remain hungry because you haven't had the deer and you can't have that mate, and therefore you can't pass on your genes, right? But the beauty of that situation is it's a binary event. It's either a 0 or 1. And therefore the event finishes and you can return back to baseline, unless you've been eaten by the lion, of course. But otherwise, you return back to baseline. And in that period of return and recovery, your body and your brain has the opportunity to reflect and learn, repair, and grow so that you're ready for the next event, right? That's the beauty of good stress. In today's modern day living, it could be preparing for a podcast. It could be preparing to speak in front of a client or a presentation. It could be asking someone out on a date. It could be going out to bat in an IPL, right? There are so many ways that good stress presents ourselves in our day-to-day lives, right? Bad stress, on the other hand, differs in a couple of very fundamental ways, right? There is, of course, the physiology, which is very different, which is hormonally driven. I'll just park that to one side. But for our day-to-day viewers, bad stress is something which happens over a long period of time. And oftentimes there is not a binary outcome. It's something which just drags and drags and drags. A bad relationship with your boss, a bad relationship at work, a bad relationship at home, right? It could be a unhealthy relationship with technology, where there's this constant barrage of emails or messages or social media doomsday scrolling, etc. So there are many examples of that in our day-to-day lives. And the reason why it's more dangerous than good stress is, number one, there's no end outcome. So it's a prolonged period of exposure. Oftentimes, the stimulus is not as high, so it's a
Yeah.
slow stimulus, but it happens repetitively over a long period of time. And when that happens, the body and brain slowly begins to feel hopeless and gives up. And
Hmm.
then you develop the psychological consequences of distress and the metabolic and physical effects of bad stress as well. The cortisol, the inflammation, the insulin resistance, the fatty liver, the diabetes, all the problems that we're faced with in today's world. Because our behaviors change, we then gravitate towards stimulus and caffeines and dopamine closures because we're not able to complete that particular task. So that's the key distinction. Gravitate, learn from, and embrace good stress.
Okay.
Mitigate, stay away from, and heal from bad stress.
And when it comes to distress and eustress, this is the only difference, that distress is one of like a constant, low intensity, consistent throughout the day or throughout the long period of time. And I think eustress is something like a acute kind of thing. There is a spike and there is a resolution, and the baseline is increased with the help of the recovery. Correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Pretty much. That's a great summary of it. And some of the seminal works that have happened in this space, the most famous paper ever written on this was by two biologists called Yerkes and Dodson, where
Yeah.
they studied model organisms and they applied a different amount of arousal and stress to those organisms. And they found that as they increased the amount of arousal, the performance of those organisms started to go up. But
Hmm.
there was a finite limit to that. Once they reached the apex, any further application of stress actually led to a decline in output and outcome. And this is very important for anyone who manages teams, or anyone who's in a position of leadership. When you're thinking about getting performance from your group, a certain amount of stress is fundamental to achieve a higher state. But do not over apply too much, because there will reach a limit where any further application of stress actually causes a break and leads to a net reduction overall in terms of the performance layer.
Sir, you have used a term called allostatic load. I want you to simplify that term, because the context I want you is that there are a lot of workers, professionals, whether they are in corporates or medical doctors, medical residents, who are having a period of extended stress exposure, whether it be a residency, first year, second year, third year, emergency duty, or let's say a corporate worker who is onto a project with a strong and abrupt deadline. So I want you to explain what happens inside the body when there is a consistent amount of high level of stress inside the body, or the body is exposed to such kind of stressors.
So immediately what is happening is the hypothalamic pituitary axis is being activated and the
Okay.
HPA axis is being activated. And that causes a huge surge in catecholamine secretion in the body, right?
Yeah.
Now, what happens in the immediate short term is adrenaline, which is the primary hormone which is activated. And that is actually part of the sympathetic nervous system, the fight and flight mechanism. And it leads to preparing the body to complete a particular task. So you will
Okay.
immediately have vasodilation of the eyes, your vision gets better, your cardiac capacity will increase, so the heart rate goes up, the stroke volume will increase, your respiratory rate will increase. Therefore, you're breathing in more oxygen, you're carrying more oxygen, you're delivering more oxygen. There's a vasodilation of your arterioles and capillaries, so more blood flow reaches the muscle. Your liver, your hepatic cells start to create gluconeogenesis. So glucose is secreted into the bloodstream to prepare the body to achieve that, to either run very fast away from something or towards something, etc. So the body is beautifully primed by the HPA axis to prepare itself to complete that task. But there's
And that too in high performance, right?
in high
That is for the high
performance.
performance. Yeah. Yeah.
And that isn't acute because you have a finite capacity of glycogen in your liver. You have a finite capacity of your heart rate and stroke volume, etc. Right? This is the good stress component. But if that happens over and over again for long periods of time, the hormonal axis begins to shift and we move away from adrenaline in the short term towards
Hmm.
cortisol in the long term. Cortisol,
Yeah.
again, still secreted by the adrenal glands from a different
Hmm.
type of cell function, but cortisol has a different role on the body. Right? It
Hmm.
doesn't lead to the acute sudden surge in capacity. It leads to this chronic state of inflammation because it attacks the endothelial cells across the body. So you have this sterile systemic inflammation across the entire body. Your hepatocytes are then primed, and you continuously try to create a level of glucose in the bloodstream that ultimately leads to insulin resistance. And therefore, the adipocytes start to store fat and energy instead of utilizing fat and energy. So there's a metabolic consequence of that. There are effects on the brain and the psychological central nervous system where we start to see an atrophy rather than a hypertrophy. So there are certain parts of the brain which, when primed too much over and over repetitively, actually we start to see that a decline in function. So focus drops, memory drops, concentration drops. So these are not things that we want to see in the long run. So when you have that small stimulus, steady, annoying niggling every single day over a period of time, you lead to this decline in function, which is the problems that we see in day-to-day living today.
So you have used a term called 90-second rule, like stress comes in a wave. And can you explain that? Because what you mentioned is something of a consequences of weeks or months of chronic stress. But the 90-second one, you were talking about the acute kind of the good kind of stress, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is something we should all be aware of because that acute stress can sometimes lead, if it happens repetitively, can lead to your brain developing sort of a chronic response.
Okay.
So what I wanted to introduce to the readers in the book was this idea that the acute phase is finite in its time. So if you have the intrinsic capacity, the resiliency to deal with it, much like a surfer in the ocean, right? That wave is going to crest and break and eventually pass. And your job is just to stay in that one place, understanding that that wave will pass through. So it's a very small amount of time when you think about it, right? 90 seconds is quite a small amount. When you're in it, you feel like that's a lifetime. But if you can develop that intrinsic capacity and the resiliency to deal with it, you will appreciate that this too shall pass, and it will allow you to then be on the other side of that response
Yeah.
curve and therefore respond in a particular better way.
Hmm. The mental framing is really important, and you really highlighted that in the first or second section of the book. But before that, I want to know about the Goldilocks zone, or like let's say Yerkes-Dodson law that you have mentioned. That everything in moderation is good, everything in extremes has its consequences. Can you explain when you view it for the stress?
You know, the beauty of, so it's called the Goldilocks zone because it's from that famous children's story,
Yeah.
right? Which is, it's neither too hot nor too cold. It's just perfect in the middle. Obviously, Buddhism and many spiritual practices also talk about the middle path where you need some amount of stress, but no, not a non-stress. And my favorite metaphor is the instrument, which is a string, which if there's too little stress and you pluck it, it makes a very funny sound.
Yeah.
If it's too tight, you pluck it, it'll snap. But if it's got the right amount of tension and you pluck it, it produces the melodic note. It's the
Yeah.
same way for the human body. So we have to understand and appreciate what is our Goldilocks zone when it comes to a particular stressful event. The interesting thing about the Goldilocks zone is that as you expose your body repetitively to the same stimulus in a good way, i.e., allowing your body to recover thereafter, your tolerance and therefore where you are in that Goldilocks curve can shift to the right hand side. Take
Yeah.
the analogy of a cold plunge, right? I have a lot of
Yeah.
people who me saying, you know, my athletes, my IPL athletes and Olympians, they like to get into the cold plunge. And when they do that immediately, they say, Doc, I can hardly manage 5, 10, 15 seconds. But as you repeat that exposure over and over of time, as you train the brain through breath work to manage that stress wave and ride it out on the other side, you will find that you can increase the amount of time to that particular exposure. And you can go 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, etc. Right? So this is an example of understanding your Goldilocks zone and appreciating that if you can expose and learn and recover, your Goldilocks zone can slowly shift over time, and you'll be more intrinsically having a higher level of resiliency to deal with that going forward.
So whenever it comes to dealing with stress, your approach is it starts with the mindset, right? There is a cognitive framing involved, which straight away reconfigures the nature of stress and also the way you are going to approach it. So what's your what's your initial primer for this? How we can start approaching stress in a different way just by changing our mindset or cognitive reframing?
The whole reason, and chapter 1 of the book, the very, very first piece, it's called Stress is a Muscle, Train It.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the idea was that in the same way as we understand that we go to the gym or we work out at home using some weights to train the muscle by exposing it to a stimulus, that act of resistance against gravity, it creates a stimulus in the muscle learns from it. In the period of recovery, it grows. Hypertrophy happens. Same way is stress. So our job is not to shy away from stress. It's to appreciate that there is an opportunity to learn from stress when it presents itself in the right way. And I gave 4 examples in chapter 1. Speak up in a meeting. A lot of people have the fear of public speaking because they worry, will I sound like a fool? But the only way of overcoming that fear is actually to practice it. So start, and believe me, everyone in that room is having the same thought. And the people who are speaking a lot have gone through this curve themselves. So one simple act could be in tomorrow's stand-up, just say something, share an idea. And over a period of time, you will gain the confidence, the articulation, and the ability to improve that. The second is try something new in terms of a workout that challenges you. Most people today do the same workout every single day. They'll go to the gym, fantastic, but they'll do the same 5 exercises. And they're finding that their body is not growing, it's not improving. Because growth only happens when you stress the body. So work out a different part of the body. Try a balance exercise. Try going on for a 30-minute run with some friends. Do something different which stresses the body in a different way. And you will find that you feel different. You suddenly feel more alive. And you'll actually learn from that opportunity. The third example I gave was skip a meal. Intermittent fasting, calorie restriction, is a good stress response for the body. Right. So delay your breakfast by a few hours, bring your dinner up by a few hours, make your lunch a little lighter than usual. Feel hungry in your stomach. That's a good signal. It tells your cells, okay, it's time for me to undergo autophagy. Let me hunt around for those those badly constructed proteins and let me recycle it. So these are all ways. There are many more in the book, of course, as well. But these are ways that you can apply stress in a good way, in a small way today, but allow the body to learn from there.
I want to cover the individual pointers that you mentioned, but before that, I want to come down to the mindset thing, because you mentioned a couple of times in the section itself that just by cognitive framing, like you mentioned a term called 3-second rule of overthinking, 3-2-1, wherein the prefrontal cortex has been activated. There's an author called Mel Robbins. She has written a book called 5-second rule, wherein she tells that once you count reverse from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it just snaps your prefrontal cortex and your stress response or stress framing is like never before. So can you explain the framing? I'm just talking about the mental framing. There are no tools that we have to do, any interventions that you have done, just the framing. Like I'm facing a event wherein I have to talk to someone who I look up to and I'm really apprehensive or I'm really stressed out about my meeting. Then how can I just frame my mindset according to a way wherein that the stress is not the way I imagine it to be?
Visualization is one of the most powerful tools we have, whether it's the athletes we work with or the CEOs and entrepreneurs that I spend a lot of time with, which is, look, reality is nothing but a story which is playing inside of our head.
Yep. It's a story.
We tell ourselves a story of negativity, we manifest a reality which comes true, which is negative. When we play a solid, positive narrative in our head, we can change the outcomes of those particular events. It's why you'll see Formula One drivers who walk the route before race day. It's why any IPL cricketer is thinking about that last over. The ball is coming in on the leg side. What am I going to do? And they've played it out 100 times in their brain so that when that moment comes, their body knows instinctively what to do and they lead to positive outcome. So we all have the opportunity to reframe the story which is playing in our head. So rather than tell ourselves that I am fearful of speaking up in front of my boss today because of what could negatively happen, imagine and play a story in your head which is one where you've created an incredible point which has landed really well. Everyone appreciates how good you are. And suddenly the boss gives you that opportunity, right? That's the story that you play in your head and then you manifest it because the opportunity will come. You just have to be there to capture it at the right time. So reframe the story and then take the opportunity when it presents itself.
Right. And what's the importance of labeling a emotion or a labeling of what you say stress that we are experiencing? Because I've read sometime back that whenever you are stressed, just tell that I'm excited.
Yeah.
Like if I'm stressed to talk about you, then there is a cognitive reframing where I tell that I'm really excited to talk to Dr. Marcus. And
Yeah.
just the reframing and the labeling of the event actually changes the response that your body is about to experience when you are approaching that event. So what's the science behind this? Just
The-
by mindset?
Yeah, look, the science is actually pretty interesting because physiologically, there is practically no difference between being in a state of fear and being in a state of excitement. The
Okay.
only difference which is present is the subjective emotion for how you've
Okay.
labeled that particular event, right?
Okay.
The opportunity to jump out of a plane with a parachute on your back. Some people feel that to be an incredibly exciting opportunity. Some people will be overwhelmed with fear. The
Yeah.
event is exactly the same. You are at 10,000 feet, you're in an aircraft, you've got an open door, and you're about to jump on, and the parachute is going to open behind you, right? But it's the subjective emotion which is playing in your head. But if I measure the blood pressure of both people, exactly the same. If I measure the heart rate or the cortisol and adrenaline concentration in their blood, exactly the same. It is the label which you've applied to it which shifts and potentially shifts the outcome. Because when you are operating from a position of fear, your amygdala is being primed and the prefrontal cortex doesn't have the opportunity to make rational, objective decisions. And therefore, you're operating from a position of fear and subconscious. However, when you're in a positive state of mind, and the amygdala is actually much calmer. A surgeon will talk about a state of flow, an artist will talk about a state of flow, a Formula One driver will talk about a state of flow. When you are operating from that position, your prefrontal cortex is able to make an objective analysis of what's happening. It's a rational response which you can provide, and oftentimes it's a better outcome because of it.
Right. Sir, you mentioned that you had worked with Navy SEALs, how they approach stress, because I think the term that you mentioned that stress is a signal, not a sign. Then what is that framing? I want to know about it. How can we perceive it as a signal and not a sign?
Yeah. So I spent a few years in the reserve forces in the Royal Air Force in England. So I spent a lot of time
Yeah.
working with fighter pilots and aerobatic teams, etc. And from the military, the learning we had, and even the work I did with astronauts at NASA, studying them, it's this model that I just described, which is they are so fine tuned with their body that they can identify when that signal is arising. But rather than allow it to overwhelm them and create an opportunity of fear, they allow it to move towards a position where they can create that rationality and drive it towards potential outcomes. So it's appreciating your signals that your body is telling you. Your heart rate will begin to elevate. Why is it elevating? What is going on around me which is creating that? Is it something which is disastrous? Or actually, is it just a consequence of the stimulus, but I actually have a much greater control over it? If that's the
Yeah.
second situation, you're able to then manage it and almost create a level of distance between the physiological event and your feeling of objectivity. And then you can
Okay.
create a rational event thereafter.
Okay. Sir, you are against internalization of stress, right? Because you mentioned that you don't need to process it or internalize it. You have to redirect it. I didn't get you at that time. How? what do you say? What's the practical takeaway of that? How can you redirect it without processing? Because any person needs to process an event before he chooses to redirect it, or what you say, externalize it, or do something about that. But without processing, how do you think redirection works?
No, so it's not about not processing it. You're absolutely right. Processing is required, but there are people who process and internalize it, i.e., they don't take the
Okay.
opportunity to learn from it. And
Okay.
when that stress is internalized, when that distress is internalized, it leads to all of the consequences we spoke about, the psychological effects,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
metabolic effects, etc. Whereas people who have a healthy relationship with stress, when they process it, they think about it, it's almost like you look at it as a ball in front of you.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
the stress. Now, what can I learn from that opportunity so that the next time I face that, I produce a better outcome, right?
Yeah.
So processing is important. Creating a sense of distance from the event is critical, and then reflecting and learning is beneficial.
Hmm. So you had here a bunch of externalization techniques or methods wherein you can externalize the stress that you just mentioned, that redirecting or destroying it with the method of externalization. One of that was writing down or journaling down. How
Yes.
that way of processing stress works. I want to learn the science of it, because the thing is, like meditation, journaling has become a new lingo when it comes to content creation. Every other content creator is telling that do journaling, do journaling, do journaling. But from a longevity physician and a stress specialist, I want to learn the science behind it. How just writing down our thoughts processes stress in different way than we do it in our overthinking loop that we generally do.
This was such an important topic that I dedicated an entire cluster, 7, 8 chapters to the
Yeah.
idea, and I called it the power of downloads. Right?
Okay.
The analogy I often think about and use is, a piece of technology. We're filming something, we're taking a photograph, we're writing a document. We're either uploading it into a cloud or we're downloading it out of the system. And the benefit of doing so is that it frees capacity in the
Yeah.
day-to-day, right? Because
Yeah.
if that data packet remains in your RAM, then it's constantly being processed and you don't have an opportunity for something new to come in, right?
Hmm.
So whether you're uploading it into a cloud of ether or whether you're downloading it, which is my preference, that's a critical. So that's the first point. The second is there's something very interesting in about the idea of writing, right?
Okay.
Many psychological studies have shown that the act of actually writing something down is a powerful mechanism to move a thought of rumination and allow it to migrate to another area because you're
Hmm.
physically, there's something haptic about writing it down on paper.
Tactile way rather than typing way. Yeah.
Exactly. It's tactile and there's a physicality where you see it in front of you and you can tell your brain, I have downloaded this thought now. It now resides on this piece of paper. So I don't need to consume my memory and focus in remembering it because it exists here. And now I can act on it in a particular way.
Yeah.
I can act on it now.
Yeah.
I can act on it later. It also allows you to constructively structure your feelings and your emotions in a way that just sort of thinking about it doesn't allow you to do so, right? So
Hmm.
I'm a big believer of downloading, of structuring, of writing, the tactile feedback that it creates. And there are 8 or 9 examples of that in the book in the
Yeah.
third.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, right. And the same, I want to extend that discussion with the kind of listing down. Like you have mentioned that rather than adding stuff, you have to subtract it, like the process of elimination. When it
Yeah.
comes to any journaling or any kind of decluttering stuff, because it has been already means ancient wisdom. It is that whenever you are stressed enough or tensed enough, just start removing things rather
Yeah.
than stockpiling it. You have to remove it. What's the scientific explanation of that? How removing or process of elimination helps the brain to process the stress in a different way?
Yeah, so I called it the undo list. I mean, it's something
Yeah.
which, as you said, a lot of people have spoken about. And the idea is that most of us have the habit of creating a to-do list and we just
Yeah.
add and add and add. But the ability to subtract from your day is so much more powerful. And you'll find that these don't have to be big things. They could be small behaviors that creep into our day-to-day lives. Many people have the habit of checking emails immediately before they go to bed.
Yeah.
Right? That's a bad thing to do, because you're adding to your mental distress immediately before trying to sleep, and you're going to have those ruminating thoughts thereafter. Many people have a positive outlook on life where they'll say yes to every request that comes in, and
Yeah,
we should learn to actually say no at times, right? That's a
yeah.
healthy distance that you create. So there are many examples of this, but I'm a big proponent of this, and you can do it every 2 to 3 weeks as a simple audit. Think about your morning routine. What are 5 things you'd want to remove? Think about your
Yeah.
nighttime routine. What are 5 things you want to remove? So it's easy to do. Yeah.
So there was a popular movie called Jab We Met. I hope you have also seen it. And there was a scene wherein Kareena Kapoor, the female lead, had
Yeah.
advised the male lead Shahid Kapoor that if you want to remove a bad memory concern to a person, you have to burn it. You have to write it in a paper. You have to use that photo. You have to burn it, and you have to flush it out of your life so that it just goes off your mind. Now that was a artistic way of dealing with stress, but you have also mentioned in a book that you can write it on a paper and burn it off, or you can tear it off. Then what's sir, is there a scientific reason, or it is just like an artistic way of thinking? Because I wasn't able to understand how it happens, like just destroying it, the name of a person or a photo of a person, how it recreates the same image or a same memory from our inside of our brain.
It's a physical act, and it's part of the narrative. So again, when something is just sitting in your brain, it's just there, it's ruminating, it's occupying space. When you've downloaded it onto a physical object, you tell yourself, this is no longer sitting here now, this is sitting here now. And I'm ripping it up, I'm burning it, I'm throwing it away, it's gone. It's a physical, visceral act that you can do. It creates a core memory, and it almost has a degree of neuroplasticity of rewiring internally. So that's why it's anything which is sort of physical, and with people with young kids will know that you teach your children through the act of physical play,
Yeah.
because we are hardwired to learn that way, and we have these tactile receptors in our palms, and we feel and we learn from it. So these are small cues and ways that we can each be better as well.
Hmm. Sir, Indians and also Westerners are known for swearing, and you have had a good news for them in your book. What's
Yeah.
the science of swearing? Because it is a method of distress, according to you.
Yes, yes. Look, and it doesn't need necessarily be a swear word. It could be another random word that you make up. But the idea is that you create a sound that you can expel from your body, almost as an act of catharsis, which you can expel with emotion and relieve your frustration rather than bottling it up inside. So you can choose your word, whatever that word is, but use it to your advantage.
Yeah, right. So let's now go into the instant hacks, because people really want the hacks, like what to do right now. Let's say I'm really stressed talking to you, and I'm really anxious about it. I'm facing a physiological sign and symptoms, like you mentioned, that my mouth is getting dried, I'm getting sweating, I'm what you say, my heartbeat is increasing. What's the instant physiological hacks that you meant, what you would like to tell people that they can try right now itself, like in a moment's time there is a change in response to the stress, that you can help with them?
The most powerful cluster of immediate things you can do, because it could happen to you at work, it could happen to you in the car, it could happen to you outside, is using various breath techniques to
Okay.
overcome that stress response and mitigate it. So there are many different versions of it. There are 2 or 3 which are really powerful that I like to use routinely, and I included it in the book. The first is the power of what's called the physiological sigh, which is
Okay.
where period of expiration is longer, typically double the period of inspiration. So you take a big breath in, fill your lung, you take another acute breath in, and then and you
Okay.
just release all of that, right? That activity activates the vagal nerve, which is part of the parasympathetic nervous system of the autonomic nervous system, the rest and digest. And it does all of the opposite things to the sympathetic drive, right? That's one. The other way, which I do a lot of, particularly when I'm going up to speak on stage, is I have a technique called the box breathing. And it's called a box
Okay.
because you go around in a box. So you inspire for 4 counts. So you fill your lungs with air. You then hold your chest in inspiration for 4 counts. You then expire through your mouth for 4 counts, and then you hold your breath in expiration for 4 counts. So in, hold, out, hold, and you repeat that 4 times. So it takes about 60 seconds odd. And again,
Hmm.
it really activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Anyone who uses a wearable device will see that their heart rate will come down. If they got a blood pressure monitor on, their blood pressure will come down. Their heart rate variability will improve in that period of time and stay improved for a period of time. So it has a
Hmm.
very, very profound vagal tonality, which is important to the body. So breath work is my favorite, and there were 8 or 9 different ways that you can use breaths in the acute
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
relieve that stressful event.
My personal favorite is 478 kind of breathing, which has been popularized by Dr. Andrew Weil, if I'm not wrong. His name is Dr. Andrew Weil from Cornell, or let's say Phoenix University. So that's the thing which I use for my sleeping routine also, and also when it happens like a de-stressing from before an event or an important stuff that is stressing me out at that particular moment. Now,
Yeah.
when it comes to hacks without breathing, what are the other hacks that you mentioned? Like just list it down, and so that people can have a pointer to just explore that by reading the book or by just googling it and teaching themselves.
So the next cluster in the book looked at movement. So there are many ways
Okay.
that you can use your physical body
Okay.
to relieve the stress that it's feeling internally, right? One example is to give yourself an embrace. So the self hug, and that
Okay.
enhances sort of oxytocin. It makes you feel connected, even though it's with yourself. And that 20-second can relieve it. The second is to actually get up and move for 2 minutes. So you're getting up off your chair, going for a quick walk. That activity for 2 to 3 minutes will make you feel better. Another mechanism is that you take your shoes off and you just ground your feet on the floor. That grounding activity makes you feel in the moment. So there were about 8 or 10 different, maybe more, even 12, 15 different
Yeah.
examples.
Yeah.
Or you can move the body and relieve the stress response as well.
You mentioned, I'm just mentioning a few of a bunch of 5 or 10 that were my favorites, so that the viewers can have its practical, what you say, implementation. One of that was mini yawn trick. Like you have to yawn half so that there is a release of from your jawbone. There
Right.
was also a what you say, similar kind of stuff which you mentioned in jaw release. I want you to expand over that. There was an emotional release that you mentioned when it comes to jaw. Whenever you release your jaw or stiffness of the jaw, there is a release of emotions. I want to know the science and how it works scientifically.
So we have a big muscle on the side of our heads called the
Yeah.
masseter muscle. The masseter muscle
Okay.
sort of comes down from the cranium, inserts itself into our mandible, our lower jaw, and it's primarily responsible for the contraction for us to chew.
Yeah.
This is activated by the trigeminal nerve, right? So it's one of the
Okay.
main cranial nerves which come out. And unfortunately, when we're in a period of a lot of stress, the trigeminal nerve gets activated and it puts a lot of tension and stress on the masseter muscle. And that's why a
Hmm.
lot of people feel these sort of tension headaches which begin to develop around their
Yeah.
temples. So one way is sort of massage your temples to release that tension. The other is to learn tricks like I spoke about, which is the jaw release, which was where you physically relax the jaw, including the palate and your tongue muscles as well, so that you're not as clenched all the time. And that subconscious stress is not sort of feeding back into a negative loop and causing sort of the headaches that develop as well. So being aware of your facial tension and using various techniques to relax your muscles of the face, the muscles of the tongue, various exposures to cold air or cold water, like dipping your face in cold ice water with ice cubes. These are all techniques that you can do to relax the facial muscles, which lead to that loop towards improving stress responses as well.
You mentioned emotional releases in quite a few times. There was an emotional release of face. There was an emotional release from the neck. Like you mentioned that the neck stiffness is one of the chief reasons of experiencing stress. And I
Yeah.
think the other was also the lower back, or let's say pelvic muscles.
Yeah.
What are these hotspots in the body that are really evident when someone is stressed? Like there are back pain is really common, neck pain is really common, suboccipital pain is really common, then frontal pain is really common. I want to know about these hotspots, especially stress hotspots in the body.
No, it's pretty much those. I mean, if you look at sort of the autonomic distribution and where it originates from, most of the activity is either coming through the cranial nerve system, or then you have the entire sacral plexus at the lower end of
Yeah.
the spinal cord. And that's probably why we see so much collection of these sorts of symptomology when it comes to clenching and tightness, etc. Some of it also is related to our ergonomics, right? The way we sit at
Hmm.
work, the way our computers are designed, it's all reinforcing the same sets of muscles. So people have poor back posture, they have poor neck posture, their lower back is always under a state of tension, they're sitting for extended periods of time, so they're not having that sort of gravitational unloading and release that's required. So these are all small things, but you can have genuinely enhanced lives by just moving around a little bit more and being conscious of these things.
Can you double down on this neck release stuff, because people are really facing with this computer or the mobile syndrome, wherein the neck is constantly exposed to a really large amount of weight when it comes to the frontal leaning. So what's the way to release the neck pressure or stress impact on our neck?
The first is looking at the ergonomics of how you set up your laptop or your computer.
Okay. Yeah.
Oftentimes, in fact, I'm probably doing it badly today, but I'm not at my desk. And that is where we end up looking down
Yeah.
into,
Downwards.
right? I have a standing desk that I typically use, and there you're at eye level with your screen.
Yeah.
So your neck is in a much more neutral posture position. You can have a high chair instead of a slouchy chair. Again, that allows the back to remain erect and straight, as opposed to having that degree of kyphosis, which is sort of
Yeah.
curving over all the time. That's another thing. Looking at how you sit with your pelvic muscles and the distribution of weight of your feet on the floor. Many people tend to subconsciously lean towards one side, or they
Yeah.
cross their legs over in a particular way. And so over a period of time, you won't feel it immediately. But when you're doing this for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, then that stress starts to accrue, and you start to develop the problems of immobility and back pain or neck pain, etc.
There were two counterintuitive hacks that you mentioned. I want to double down on them particularly. That was shoulder release, which was the dropping of the shoulder, and the other was getting your posture right or getting an erected posture. These two are counterintuitive when it comes to shoulder thing. What's your say on that? Like at one point we are telling that we should be really sitting up straight, we should make our shoulder erected, and in the next we are like we have to drop our shoulder for releasing the stress. So what's the exact thing that you were mentioning there?
No, so actually, the principle of both is the same, which is achieving a state of neutrality, right?
Okay.
Uh, and if we think about the body in two main axes, so you have the front back axis and then you
Yeah.
have the lateral axis, right? People are doing two things. One is they're leaning forward, or there's a
Yeah.
slouch which is happening.
Slouch.
So the shoulder releases, number one is actually to sit up straight, to open up
Yeah.
the muscles at the back. So your scapula are sitting nicely, and therefore there's no tension around the trapezius and the latissimus dorsi at the back. The second is the stress response, which is again when we are constantly under a state of stress, our scalene and sternocleidomastoids are pulling on the clavicle and the latissimus dorsi at the back, and they are doing this. So we end up being in a shrugging state all the
Okay.
time, right?
Okay.
And that's putting a lot of stress because of the contraction and leading to that occipital pain, which then makes its way to the front of the head. So the idea is that we sit up straight with our shoulders apart. So there's a degree of neutrality on this axis, and then there's a degree of neutrality on this axis as well. So that's what the body wants to be. But our ergonomics and our lifestyles just create those different axes changes for us.
There was an interesting way you put about the tongue. Like you told that there is a tongue posture also. That was the first time I also got to
Yeah.
know about it. And there was related stuff regarding the whispering. Let's say slowing your articulation, voice, and what you say, the pitch of your words. What's the science? It's again related to the cranial nerve, the 10th cranial nerve that we discussed, that the trigeminal nerve that innervates tongue muscles and all that.
Yeah, so the tongue is supplied by the hypoglossal nerve.
Hypogloss. Yeah.
Hypoglossal, which is, of course, it's different to the vagus
Eighth.
nerve, but it's
Yeah.
still part of the
12th.
cranial
12th
domain.
now. Yeah.
And what happens is, again, we're not conscious of where our tongue is in our palate. And there's a degree of
Yeah.
stress there. The
Exactly.
tongue is actually one of the most powerful muscles of the body. Right?
Yeah.
One of the longest, strongest muscles of the body. So if we are just more aware of where our tongue is and it's resting rather than constantly in a state of contraction, again, it's a subtle relaxation which happens around the mouth muscle. That's one. The second, I think you mentioned what the pitch of the voice, is it?
Whispering. Whispering. Yeah. You mentioned that you have to whisper it.
Yeah. Whispering, again, it's a softening, emotively low state. It sets up a different vibrational frequency in the vocal cords. It makes you feel much more confident and secure because you have your parents whispering in your ear, you have your loved ones whispering in your ear. So rather than raising the tone and the pitch and shouting and being aggressive all the time, you just calm it down and you soothe it down.
Okay.
You allow that
Okay.
vibration to happen in the chest, and it just makes you feel a little bit more centered and in control at that particular time.
Hmm. So you are a high performance specialist also, and you have been working with sports person also. I am
Yep.
a tennis player, semi-pro tennis player
All
who
right.
plays in the Gujarat circuit. And my favorite player of lately, after the Federer retirement, is Novak Djokovic. And
Right.
when it comes to stress and de-stressing or changing the stress towards its means like moving the entire 180 degree of stress, it is like the epitome example is Novak Djokovic.
Yeah.
And there was a technique that you also have mentioned in the book, that is mirror technique. So Novak Djokovic has an habit of taking medical timeouts mid match, especially when he's losing the match, like best of 5 sets, the famous 2019 Wimbledon final or 2011 against the Federer. He was 2 sets down and then he came back from 2 sets down, and there was a consistent ritual that he follows. He takes the medical timeouts precisely of 10 minutes and he goes to washroom. God knows what he does in washroom, but of lately there are insiders and also Djokovic himself who has come on podcast, and he tells that I go to the washroom, I have the entire wall shaped mirror in front of me and I talk to myself for 7 full minutes, and that's the particular moment I changed the match around like 180 degree from its neck. So can you tell the high performance science behind this, because it is really powerful when it comes to talking yourself in the mirror? I've experienced it. I've been doing it practically in my matches also. In let's say before this podcast also, I was dressing up and I was talking myself to the mirror also. What's the science behind it?
I hope I wasn't creating so much distress for you that you had to
Hmm.
spend time.
No. It's my ritual. It's kind of ritual whenever I do in a corporate talk or whenever go to the podcast. It is a ritual that I follow.
So there are two things that are happening, and even for people who like watching cricket, right? The IPL is just finished. I do a lot of work in IPL as well, and we see that oftentimes after a strategic time out, a match begins to change. Either a wicket
Yeah.
happens in the over immediately after that, or something happens. And typically, it's a wicket rather than a lot of runs being scored. The idea of states of flow. So whenever your opponent is in a state of flow, you need to do whatever you can to break that state of flow.
Yeah.
Right? And the best way of doing it is calling for timeout, right? So Djokovic obviously uses it to his advantage with the toilet breaks. The strategic timeouts are there for other reasons, and other sports have their own mechanisms for such things. So that's the first way, which is breaking the state of flow for your opponent. And then number two, giving yourself a period of time where you can distance yourself from what's happening acutely and reinforce a particular visualization technique or a story. Right? So the mirror is there because obviously you can't have a coach there coaching you, but you can certainly tell yourself these things. And they're equally powerful. Ultimately, we are our best coach when we can be accountable and disciplined to ourselves. And Djokovic does that really, really well. So these are the two ways that this technique typically works. It disrupts the opponent, and it gives yourself an opportunity to look yourself in the eye, coach yourself, and come back stronger and better.
I'm a strong fan of James Clear and his atomic habits model. And if you summarize his entire model, it is like change your environment in a way wherein the habits that you perform or the rituals that you follow are seamless, are like subconscious for you. And the last section of your book was around this only, that you have to use environmental levers and lifestyle design in a way that the stress response is more like towards a good stress rather than bad stress. Can you explain and expand towards the what you say environmental design that can help us deal with stress a better way?
We are intrinsically lazy. We, as in all human beings, are intrinsically lazy. And like water, we will always choose the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
Even with the highest level of discipline and willpower, all of us will have moments where we'll crack and break, right?
Yeah.
And the most effective way of reducing the frequency of those events is not creating the opportunity for it in the first place. So, for people who tell me, Doc, I have a snacking habit at night, the simplest thing to do is to just not have those snacks in your cupboard at home.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, that has changed with the advent of these damn social media apps where you can book any calorie and it's delivered. But in the old days, nobody was going to go out to the supermarket and buy something and bring it home, right? So that's an example of changing the structure. Me, for ergonomics, I don't sit at a desk like this. I have a standing desk with a high chair, right?
Yeah.
So that's my environment to encourage myself to maintain good posture, to be moving around more, to have eye contact with people on my screen. So that's a physical thing that you can do at work. Your bedroom environment, right? Don't have a screen in the bedroom. If you don't have a screen in the bedroom, you are less likely to be watching Netflix immediately before going to bed. And you're more likely to be doing something else, either with your partner or with a book or whatever, right? So these are ways you can construct. Yesterday, perfect example. I had someone who came to see me. She's on my program and she requires to take a large number of supplements because she has many deficiencies. And she says, Doc, I buy them, but I just can't remember to take them every day. That is my problem. And I said, we've got our coaches, but she said, yeah, but the coaches are not going to be there at home to remind me. So I said, I'll tell you what we do. Where do you plug your phone to charge? So she says, I plug my phone here. Keep your vitamins and minerals next to your charger at home so that when you plug your phone into charge at night, you are reminded to take your vitamins to charge your body at night.
The association, yeah.
And James talks about that as well in Atomic Habits as well. So a lot of the inspiration that I got for the book, Good Stress, Bad Stress, and the reason why I broke it down into 99 small chapters came from this idea that James had posited, which is atomic habits, breaking things down into small, bite-sized things that you can do every single day, but it becomes a default in your environment and your surrounding. And I'm a big, big believer of compounding and small change. That's the powerful way to make change. Yeah.
I want to cover 5 to 7 of your top environmental designs. Please expand it that. I would just point you out to the ritual and just help us expand it with your bookish explanation. So one of the first thing that you mentioned was reset ritual. You should have a ritual that resets your mind, that resets your way of dealing with stress. What's the practical takeaway from there?
The practical takeaway is it's like Djokovic saying timeout, right?
Okay.
So
breaking the flow.
Exactly, breaking the flow. Create a mechanism. So I have 3 things that I do at the end of my work day. Number 1 is after I finish work, I have a shower, right?
Okay.
After how I change my clothes. So I'm in a more relaxed state of clothes when I'm at home rather than just staying at home in my work clothes. It's telling my brain that I can now detach from work and I'm in another phase of my life, right? The other thing that I try to do at least 4 to 5 times a week whenever I have the opportunity is I watch the sunset, right? We have a little garden near where I live, which is by the sea, and I like watching the sunset. And it tells my brain it's the end of day. It starts that entire melatonin cascade in my brain, which starts to prepare the body for end of day, telling my body and brain that I can start to now wind down, relax, get into a more social mode with my family, etc. So these are small things. It could be so. During the pandemic, I only work on my laptop. I don't make work decisions from my phone. So I'll my laptop and I'll put my laptop away in the drawer, right?
Yeah.
So I'm automatically creating a sense of distance between work and family time and social time. So these are small things that we can each do every day to create these little reset rituals in our life.
Even clothes also make a difference, right? There are a lot of rituals related to clothes stuff. Like there are uniforms for the reason. Like there
Yeah.
are top performing CEOs like Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or even Nvidia's Jensen Huang. You might see them in one clothing and one uniform dress, or what you say, their standard, or you what you say, the dress code that they have chosen for it. Like for example, the last man I mentioned was Jensen Huang. He has that leather jacket. He brings to any event and every event without any weather differences. Like whether he is in Canada or whether he is in China or whether he is in Taiwan, he brings that leather jacket and that is on for him whenever he is at work. And let's say for me also, this cap and this sport athleisure is my way of being in the zone when it comes to recording a podcast or being my character of Dr. Smith in my YouTube channel. And
Yeah.
you mentioned the reset ritual, and that also happens for a, let's say, changing into a night dress or changing your clothes from a work wear towards a more pajamas or a more casual wear for your home. How that impacts the stress, or how that creates a line between your work and your life, because there will be people or there will be corporates talking to you that how we can make work life balance, and that might be one of the reasons that we can have a clear delineation of the work and the life.
It's just about boundaries. That's all. I mean,
Okay.
historically, we would leave the office, go home, and the
Yeah.
technology wasn't penetrated enough that we would be bombarded with work even in the home environment. That doesn't exist now because of the technology that we have
Yeah.
today, mobile technology. So we need to create other ways to create a boundary between ourselves, and that will allow us to get into a different frame of mind and move to do that particular task and activity, such as wind down for the day, recover, etc.
Hmm. You had mentioned about intermittent fasting for a while. I want to expand over that. What's your correlation between doing an intermittent fast and the body's adaptation to a stress response? How they are correlated?
So, calorie restriction, intermittent fasting is a mechanism of hormetic good stress, right?
Okay.
It is a
Please explain hormesis, because I forgot to mention that in the starting phase also.
hormesis is a biological term which we use, which is where you apply a good stress, a eustress, EUSTRESS, to the body in a
Okay.
limited finite stimulus, and allowing the body to then recover, repair, and heal through a phase of recovery and detachment, right? So it's a repetitive exposure, recovery, exposure, recovery. So intermittent fasting is a mechanism of hormesis because for that period of time, the body is in a stress state, but it's
Yeah.
finite. And the body
Hmm.
is actually beginning to adapt to a sense of metabolic flexibility. We move
Hmm.
from carbohydrate consumption as our primary fuel source because we pretty much exhaust it in 12 hours or so. And then we switch towards beta oxidation of fat and ketogenesis, right? And that typically happens around 12 to 14 hours. So intermittent fasting is very powerful, particularly when people who have metabolic dysfunction, because it retrains the body to become more sensitive to the acts of of insulin, and to use glucose much more effectively in the cells. Now, like any hormetic stress, the opportunity to learn can be translated to another phase of your life. So if I routinely, intermittently fast or calorie restrict, I'm getting a benefit from that metabolically, but I'm training my brain to do hard things. I'm
Yep.
wiring my brain to say no when they cut that cake in the workspace.
It's like
When my
willpower building up.
it's
Willpower
willpower.
building up.
And then suddenly I can apply that to another phase,
Yeah.
another example, right? And that's the beauty of it. So it's not so much, fasting improves stress outcomes elsewhere. It's your rewiring and you're training the brain to deal and manage and build the resiliency, the intrinsic capacity to do other things.
Hmm. What's the correlation between food intake, like the type of food that you choose to have it as your diet, and the stress? Do you have any takeaways for Indians when it comes to food habits and food choices?
So when we are in a state of exaggerated catecholamine release, we are naturally and potentially also, which happens in a lot of instances, in a state of sleep deprivation as well.
Yeah.
We are preferentially, our body is preferentially choosing high calorific foods rather than low calorific foods, because it
Yeah.
wants to maintain a sense of energy for the body. It's just a evolutionary biological drive. Yeah. And so that's why people will find that they move towards stimulants like caffeine or nicotine, that they move towards food items which are less healthy, like ultra processed carbohydrates, fructose, trans fats, and they don't tend to make healthier choices because the brain is trying to preserve energy and acquire energy through calories. So
Hmm.
that's why it's important to understand those signals, because if you don't understand those signals, you will start to make bad choices every day. And that, of course, leads to all the other problems that we see. So that's how
Hmm.
these things are related to one another.
You had also mentioned about the cold exposure. Now, coming from India and also residing in India, it is really rare that we get the privilege of accessing of the cold plunges and all that. So, let's say there is a common man who is on a budget when it comes to fighting his stress or dealing with stress. What's your practical takeaway from him to use cold exposure? Is the face dip enough, or you need to dip the entire body? Is only hands and extremities enough, or you have to dip the entire body? That's the context I want to ask you.
The physiological and psychological benefits of both are different. The
Okay.
face tip, where we're taking a bowl of water and adding ice and exposing just the face,
Yeah.
it's leading to a psychological improvement in terms of dopaminergic activation and
Okay. Okay.
endorphin release. So you'll get a psychological high. You will not get the physiological benefits of brown fat, of recovery and repair. That happens through whole body immersion. But you'll get the vagal tonality, you will get the psychological improvement and dopaminergic drive as well. So it's a powerful way that you can use it to your advantage. Athletes use the hand plunge. Again, you'll see a lot of tennis players doing this. I
Yeah.
like to do a lot of my marathons and training for an ultra marathon in the desert. So last year I did this as well, which is where you expose the palms to cold temperature or
Exactly.
the area of skin at the back of the neck. A lot of thermoreceptors here and here and along here as well. So that limited exposure of cold can actually drop core body temperature a few degrees as well. And a lot of athletes are now beginning to use it to their advantage, because if you drop your core degree temperature, you will be able to sustain high endurance for a longer
Yeah.
period of time. Right. So, yeah.
And what's the difference between hot and cold exposure? Because both work for de-stressing, and they have different pathways. Like there is cold shock proteins and heat shock proteins. But what is the exact protocol that you tell, that you have to do cold in the morning, hot in before the bed? How the stress response are different from both the exposures?
So, broadly speaking, there are three or four main differences. Number one is that heat is much better from a chronic perspective.
Okay.
Cold is better from an acute injury, right? That sort of
Hmm.
vasoconstriction, reduction in inflammation is why we say put a cold pack when you've been injured. Heat,
Hmm.
however, is better for chronic pains
Yeah.
like lower backs, tummies, etc. Right? So that's one. Secondly, is the physiological mechanisms of both are different, and there's even a
Hmm.
difference with sauna, which is dry, and
Yeah.
steam, which is wet. Right?
Okay.
Sauna being dry creates a much more higher degree of penetration of heat, and therefore you start to see vasodilation in muscles and the cardiovascular system.
Okay.
Steam, however, is much more superficial in nature because you're sweating. So you'll have capillary dilatation of your skin, but the penetration into the deep tissues doesn't happen as much. Right?
Hmm.
So there are distinctions between sauna and steam therapy. And most of the benefits globally from a longevity perspective are from sauna, not from steam. Right?
Okay.
And then even in cold, there's difference between whole body immersion in cold
Yeah.
water,
You
a
mentioned.
cold shower, and a cryotherapy unit using nitrogen gas, right?
Yeah.
All these are subtly different, but they're all nuances, right?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, I tell people, if you're training hard, don't go into the cold straight away, because you
Yeah.
want vasodilatation, not vasoconstriction. If you got an acute injury, locally apply cold, right? If you
Hmm.
have a chronic injury, apply heat. And
Hmm.
lastly, end of day, heat is better because it vasodilates It allows your body to release endorphins and nitric oxide, and you're in a state of calm. And cold will just create a little bit more agitation and aggression.
So if someone is building a ritual, the morning might be the face dip in a cold exposure. What you say, the face dip in the water that you mentioned, that you have to add ice and you have to dip your face. And in the night, you have to just have a hot shower. That's the no-cost solution for the masses, according to you?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So off lately, I'm loving your jamming podcast with Jaunty Roads, and that are catered to the longevity audiences. So what's your practical takeaways for every Indian? What should be the set of behaviors or a set of interventions, lifestyle interventions a Indian should have to increase his health span?
I will read you a message that I had with my mum this morning.
Okay.
And she is attending a talk later this evening, and someone is talking about biohacking, and she said, "What can I learn from this?" I said, "No idea. I don't know who this person is and I'm not involved." Then she says, "Isn't this your subject?" I said, "Yes, but I don't know what she's going to be talking about." And then she says, "I'll go. I want to see what other people are saying, but I have a master in the house." To which I say, all you need to do is this: hit the gym every day.
Yep.
Take the supplements I've given you. Eat less. Get your tests done every year and play with your grandkids. Right?
Done.
It's as simple. And then she says, "Ha ha 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 ha." Right? And it doesn't matter who you are. Your parents are always your parents. Right? They will listen. But it can really be that simple. If you spend time online on Instagram, all of these influencers will do all kinds of crazy stuff and tell you, take this peptide, take this supplement, prevention, do that. But all of that is meaningless if you don't fix the foundations and the basics first.
Exactly.
So let's get that right. Let's do it medically. Let's do it scientifically. Let's do it in the right setting. And then we can experiment and intervene with all the fancy things that are going on in life.
I think we can have a round two regarding the healthy aging, because I am about to go to University of Singapore for my healthy longevity studies there. So whenever I come back, I would like to do a jamming session with you as well, so that for the masses, they get to know about what works and what is still a biohacking stuff that needs to be avoided and needs to be ignored now.